All right. So, starting the recording for all of us on YouTube. So, if you have anything disparaging to say about Philip Chase, don't do it. Who else we got? All right. So, I'm going to start this real quick and then we're going to move on to the agenda. But since it takes about 15 minutes, I wanted to get this started. Um, this is, I got a request from Alex Video from Colorado. He wanted to see, we've talked on the last few calls, and I guess he's watched some of the videos and read some of the notes, and it's still not quite clear on how Vagrant works. So, Ted Lawless is here. This is a lot of this work is thanks to him, and I'm blatantly stealing what he's doing. But I'm going to do a live demo of how to get started with Vagrant. So, um, let me pull this over here, and I'm going to make this bigger. All right, so I don't know if Alex is here now. Oh, I lost my terminal. There we go. Okay, so I've already done this. Oh, hold on. I'm removing my folder so I can pretend like I've never done this before. So in the notes you'll see there's a link to Ted. There's Ted's picture. Hey Ted. Ted's done a fantastic job of creating a VIVO Vagrant repository on GitHub. And in his README file, there's some great instructions on how to set it up. And it's really pretty simple. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy his git clone command. And what that's going to do is make a copy of his repository down on my computer. And before I hit execute, I'm going to blow my screen up just a little bit more. I think that's pretty big.
Thank you.
And there we go. So that took a real long time, as you can see. Oh, did it again. I apologize. All right. So now we have a VIVO Vagrant repository. And you can see in there we've got the README file, we've got a Vagrant file, we've got the provisioning information and some work. And I'm going to look at the Vagrant file real quick here. So this file contains information that Ted used to create basically the configuration that Vagrant is going to use to do all the setup for us for our machine. So, for example, in the Vagrant file, it's just a config file. It tells you what type of environment this happens to be an Ubuntu Precise 64 box. It gives the URL of a box file. In short, a box file is essentially just a copy of an empty virtual machine, and Vagrant.com keeps those online so that you don't have to create them yourself, although you can. Um, but they're great places to start. A lot of times, if you're just prototyping something, or if you're making something available for the public, like Ted did, it's great to use this web accessible box file because then other people can just git clone your work and do what we're about to do. Um, you can also config the VM. You can modify the memory, so you can see that it looks like Ted modified the memory. You can configure port forwarding and other information. Basically, anything that you could do with a virtual box or virtual machine where you configure it through the interface, you can do it through one of these files. So I believe the next thing is just to do Vagrant up. And yes, it is. And you can see here from, we blow up Ted's instructions. So we cloned it. We're in the directory. We're going to do a Vagrant up. Now, this presumes that you have installed Vagrant. I wasn't going to go through the how to install Vagrant on your machine, but if you do a Google search for Vagrant and you go to vagrantup.com, this is the website, vagrantup.com. I'll put a link in the notes. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a really easy download if you have a Mac or Linux environment. And that gives you the Vagrant tools. The install will automatically give you the Vagrant tools on the command line. I'll go ahead and put that here. All right, so back here. So we've cloned the repo from Ted using git clone. We haven't made any changes to the Vagrant file. I just wanted to show it to you. So I'm going to do a Vagrant. Uh, that's the command. And as you watch here, it's going to start to instantiate the machine. It's going to call it default, and it's going to use VirtualBox as the provider. Right now, it's importing the base box file, the precise 64 file, which means essentially it's downloading it from that URL that we saw in the config file. The cool thing about using Linux box files, by the way, is they can be pretty small, so you can see it's done downloading it already. So this machine's actually up. It's actually configured and up, and it's doing the booting right now. The part on this process that takes a while is Ted actually does a cloning operation of the VIVO repositories as he builds it. So he builds it dynamically. And that's pretty neat because if you wanted to use your own repos for VIVO or Vitro and you wanted to make your own configurations, you could do that. So it's doing apt-get update on the machine right now. I'm going to let this cook for a while and move on in the agenda, and we'll come back later. But just take my word for it, as while we're talking, this takes about 15 or 20 minutes. And it only takes 15 or 20 minutes the first time. There's ways to halt the machine and keep bringing it up and down that don't have it reinstall the VIVO every time. Any questions so far before I move on? Okay, great. All right, so this was item 0 on the agenda because I got it added, and I realized, hey, I should probably start this first, so it can run while we're talking about the other agenda items. And then so Philip is here to remind me to come back to it in about 15 minutes. All right, so one of the great suggestions we had at the last meeting was allowing people to bring their ideas to the group. I mean, originally I had talked quite a bit about waiting till people had finished applications and having them do demonstrations and prototypes of such. And but I think it was Yin from NYU that said maybe what we should do is encourage people to bring their ideas to the group before they built them. So I thought I'd start and bring my idea that I'm thinking about doing that I haven't done yet. I talked a little bit about it before, and I was hoping that by bringing my idea to the group, I might get some feedback on some suggested courses of action on how I might do this. So right now we have a need to develop essentially an all.n3 file for UF. And what we're trying to do is basically spit out all of our triples into a single N3 file. There's a couple reasons for this. One, John Corson Reichert asked me for it because he wants to give it to somebody else to use for a project. And also, we want to use it here because we're thinking that we can use the N3 file to do some comparisons and loggings that we might be able to do faster than by running Sparkle queries against our Fuseki endpoint, which we seem to have some challenges with at times based on performance. So those are a couple of the reasons. I had tried using a process that we had in the past that used the harvester in a shell script, but I was getting some memory errors, and so I decided to see if I could do something with Python and Jenna. And believe it or not, again, I stumbled upon an article by Ted Lawless. So I played around with that for a day or so, and I got stuck again with trying to get the example to work. But I got some encouragement from Ted this morning. He's also using what was it, Ted? Jthon and the harvester to export all your N or to get N3.
Yeah, it's probably similar to what the shell scripts you mentioned did, but it's just a way to call the harvester classes using Python syntax.
So that's one of the things I'm going to try. Now I hadn't had a chance to email you back, Ted, because I figured you'd be on the call today. Are you able? Have you exported all of your triples out using that method?
Yes, and I had to. increase the memory given to the heap for the export script, like you mentioned. I think I used
2 gig.
4 gigs
Yeah, it was pretty big.
and yeah, I've done that a few times. Exported all the different name graphs, so it did work at least in our case. I imagine your data is probably larger.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm going to experiment with. I was looking for the you sent me the example. I'm trying to find it on your GitHub site. Was it in Gist?
Yeah, let's see. There, I pasted it into the
Oh,
chat.
cool. There we go. Awesome. Yeah. So you're using the GenaConnect library.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the issue was I got to go back. I think I think this is the part that that's going to help me out right here is using JSON to be able to change that. Although that's one of the things I guess I can go look at on my shell script too is to figure out if there's a way I could send in a command line argument to get to allow the JVM to use more memory. That's a good idea. Um, is anybody else using anything outside of Vivo itself to export out any of their data as N3? That's got any suggestions?
Uh, yeah, this is Richard. I don't know if I'm the one that maybe should talk. Maybe I've Shane Patrick here too, but we wrapped a bunch of the Jena API, or we call a bunch of Jena API just from JRuby, and we had something that would uh, and actually the person that wrote it isn't even here, but it was what do we call it? Sparkler, I think we called it, or something.
Yeah.
That's our name for it, but it would dump the data into another group needed the data in a relational database. So we'd actually sparkle it out every morning and put it into a database, and our thought was to actually give that to them at some point because they need that data, and this would be kind of an example for what other people could use to. And it uses what am I trying to say, Rails and Active Record and all that to handle putting it in the database, but it uses Jena to sparkle the data out.
So you're using like Jena on the command line, or using like Arc or what, or the?
No, it's actually calling because it's using JRuby, so you can operate on Java libraries. So we just call the Jena API directly. So.
Oh, got it.
It basically uses that. It calls it within JRuby, and it creates a bunch of Ruby objects.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that was the example that from Ted that I had started with. It was using what's the name of that library, Ted? The Python library that lets you create a Java class.
I believe it's called Pygenius or something.
Genius, yeah. So it sounds like a similar approach. Have you guys put your Sparkler code out there anywhere yet?
No, not yet. We are a little behind on getting stuff out. There's a few other things we wanted to put out, but it just it takes time, and we are kind of lacking for time right now.
Is it something you would put out? I mean, I'd be happy to create a repo for you guys and put it all up there and do all that work if that was or at least put it on the wiki. Or is it a licensing issue?
Yeah, no, that one I'm not as sure about. Like, we could probably do it. I think it just comes down to, do we have, like, for this one, I think we'd have to pull it out of the project a little bit and take any, well, this isn't the mapper, this is just the sparkler thing. So it shouldn't be too tight. It might, our particular Git repo might have, I don't know, might have passwords for the database for shoving it in. I don't know. So we couldn't just take our Git repo and push it to GitHub, but we'd have to flush the history and push it out.
My guess is that the pieces that we're thinking about doing this for, this might be the easiest.
Yeah.
Because since we do have a small project that's basically just a sparkler plus like some database stuff. We might be
Right.
able to pull it out.
Well, I tell you what, I'd really appreciate it because I promised John this stuff like 2 weeks ago, and I've been pulling my hair out trying to find a way to do it. And just in a matter of a day, I've hooked up to two different ways to do it. So I'm pretty excited because I think other people are going to want to be able to do this. I mean, eventually, I'm going to do this as a regular process and post our UF Vivo data set out there on our Vivo URL so that people can get it through the web because it is pretty big. But it's just another way we want to show that our data is out there and get people something that they can play with in their Vivo. And eventually, hopefully, in our Vivo Vagrant too, I can use that as a place to pull in a data set. So any help appreciated if you guys have a chance to do that. I mean, John or
Okay.
John at Cornell, are there other people that are wanting these type of N3 data sets to work with, right?
Yeah, I mean, this particular person is working on a longer-term collaboration between VIVO and Eurocris, the European data standard called Serif, and he's trying to get something ready for the VIVO camp in Germany the end of this month. So I've been telling him, yeah, there's linked data commands, there's some Sparkle endpoints, but he doesn't really have time to figure out how to learn all of that and assemble the data himself. He really wants to get, at least one large VIVO because he's working on mapping over to the European standard called Serif, CERIF. So I think it's going to be fairly common that people would like to be able to get at a whole site's data.
Well, we're working on it. I think that definitely with Ted's help. Thank you, Ted. I've made a breakthrough, and so hopefully, John, I'll have something by the end of the week. Well, hey, I mean, Richard, that and guys at Duke, that would be fantastic. I know it's extra work, but if you get a chance, I think people would like to see yours because I know I think there's a lot of Ruby folks that follow the project as well as Python folks, so I think they would definitely appreciate that. It's interesting though that everyone is still using Jenna to some extent to do all the connections. I guess that is kind of the only way, huh? No one's found any other ways.
And we're using Jenna to talk to our endpoint, so
Yeah.
not directly to the database.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Or wait, sorry, we might be going to database still, but we were set up to move it over to go directly to our endpoint.
Yeah, we sort of set it up for both strategies, sort of anticipating that when our endpoint is ready to handle that, we'll try to switch over.
Yeah, we've been having.
Because we kind of want.
Go ahead.
We kind of want this to be an example for other folks to consume the endpoint.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great examples on using our endpoint, I feel like, but for some of the bigger things, it's just we have some performance problems. When Nicholas wants to go use it to do something bigger, he usually has to go restart it to get it to free up the memory, and we haven't been able to figure out how to configure it per se to make it not. It works great on smaller things. A lot of the examples we run a lot of our data ingest programs against it as a source to go reference data in Vivo, like for example, to see if a person's already in before we put them in. But when I tried to do some tests on trying to pull these, our triples out, it basically chokes on trying to do all of them or half of them, or so. Well, that was my idea. So I appreciate everyone's help, and I think this is definitely a valuable addition to this group. I would encourage anyone that's on the call, and I'll probably follow this up in the notes I send out, that if they have ideas that they want to get some encouragement or feedback from the group on, to definitely bring them to the meeting because I think this is a good place to discuss them. And I definitely appreciate everyone's help and suggestions. I'm kind of cutting it a little short because I want to give Jim Blake some time because Jim has offered to talk for a few minutes about Vivo and developer mode. So Jim, are you ready? I can give you a few seconds here and check on our updates.
I'm all set. If you wanted to
I can
make me the presenter so I can share my screen.
I can. So there's the VM. It's still upgrading itself here. All right, change presenter. There we go.
Okay. All righty.
And thank you, Jim, for agreeing to present. I had sent out a desperate plea for someone to help present, and Jim was the first one to chime in.
Well, I had a question when that came up as to whether what I'm doing was appropriate for tools and apps, but I'm actually looking for feedback much in the way that you were. Can you see my screen at this point?
Absolutely. VIVO Developer Panel.
Yeah, I threw together some quick slides. And again, this is really something that has been kicking around in my head. We're focused here on trying to get this release out. I shouldn't say trying to get this. We're focused on getting this release out. So, when this thing started itching at me, I just wrote down some notes. And, of course, I'd be really interested in people's reaction or suggestions or telling me that I'm doing it wrong, because it's a lot easier to get that information early on. So what I wanted to do, we have options built into VIVO that are useful by the developers. And one that's been there for a long time is this developer.defeat free marker cache. It was actually named something else, but and it was when it was created, it was left undocumented. There was nothing in example deploy properties about it, because the person who created it said, no, if you accidentally left this set, you could really slow down your production machine. What this does, ordinarily, FreeMarker will just cache templates, and every minute it will look to see if you ask for a template that hasn't been refreshed in more than a minute, it will look on disk to see if it's refreshed. So as a developer, if you go making changes and then quickly try to load the page and see what happens, you see that your change didn't work, didn't happen, didn't have any effect until you've waited for at least a minute, and then it does have an effect. So this was put in there to say, well, just defeat the cache. So every time you bring up a page, every one of those templates is loaded from scratch from the disk. And again, this can slow you down, but for a developer, it may very well be what you want. Another thing that's been added recently with the multiple language support, we read in those language files when VIVO starts up and don't look at them again. They're also cached. But this allows a developer to say, well, just defeat that internationalization cache so that will be loaded every time. The third one that's been put in is insert free marker delimiters. And what this does, if it's true, is just puts HTML comments into the code that's being generated by the templates. It actually puts those comments into the templates themselves, so that when the code is generated, if you do a view source from your browser, you'll be able to see an HTML comment saying, this is where head.ftl begins, and then a little bit later, this is where head.ftl ends. It's not that verbose. So that you can look and say, well, I see that this template included that other template, which included this template, and that's the one that actually generated the stuff that I'm having a problem with, and allows you to just very quickly narrow down your search for where things have to happen. So these are already out there. Something that's been added recently, actually during the testing of this release, is this logging RDF service. You may be aware we're redirecting the way we do model access, and it all goes through this RDF service. It gets broken into Sparkle queries, even if what you're doing is executing Jenna calls to walk through the model, to list a group of statements or define statements that meet criteria. That's translated into Sparkle queries, which are run against the RDF service. And it's possible to turn on this logging RDF service so that every single query against the data model will be written to the log. Just as an aside, the configuration data doesn't go through the RDF service. So by that I mean like user accounts stuff, and also the display ontology, which properties come first in your output and what properties are in which property groups. All that doesn't go through an RDF service yet, although we're looking at making that happen in the future, again, so that we can have flexibility, so that people can just get away from MySQL or any relational database and store that data in any way they'd like to. But getting back, so you can turn on this logging RDF service. If you want, you can add stack traces to every query so that you can find out where those queries were issued from, and that really generates the log file at an amazing rate. And so there's also possible to add a restriction there, which allows you to specify a regular expression and say, all right, at least one of the fully qualified class names in the stack trace must match this restriction, must match this regular expression, or we won't write to the log at all on this one. So then you can just say, well, I'd only like to see stuff that comes from the Sparkle Query data getter, and I can turn that, put that restriction, and then it's safe to add the stack trace information if I want, so I can see who's calling that data getter, etc., without spilling out literally megabytes of logging. And this is documented on the wiki page. So there are a bunch of features that are out there, and we could think of some others. As I say, the biggest problem is that you could, if you put this into your production server, even in your development system, you may not know that it's up there and running, but it could really slow down your server. Again, that loading every free marker template every time around is a lot of unnecessary overhead and gives no visible indication. With the logging RDF service, okay, you might take a clue from the fact that your log is growing at an alarming rate and say, maybe I've got an option that's set. But other than that, no obvious indicator. And the other thing is that I have to shut down Tomcat and restart it in order to change any of these settings. So I said I want to have that indicator. I want the flexibility to start and stop or modify these features. And I also want to sort of set this up as a framework so that when new diagnostic features are thought of, they can be added to that. So right now, I already mentioned one of these things adds information to the log. Another one adds comments to the HTML. I've been wondering about whether we should actually add visible items at the bottom of the page if there's something that we want to diagnose there, perhaps thread activity or whatever, and even the possibility of creating a window right there in the browser that would show information for the current request. Of course, let me go back to the bang for the buck issue, and that is, I don't know how much time I'm going to want to spend on this because we've got so many priorities competing for developer effort, but so we'll start with something basic that gives the most bang for the buck and then start getting more luxurious. So again, this was the sort of thing that I was just throwing around and said, all right, I want to give people a chance to suggest something better. So I put together this possibility that just says, all right, if any of these developer options are enabled, I want to see something on every page. I want it to be there so that no one's going to be running these accidentally. And then the click for options there, if I click on that banner, I would see this. Again, I just hacked together the drawing, although I have to say probably if I were allowed to do the user interface without any help from a designer, it would probably look no better than this. So this just gives me the ability to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Said form follows function.
There you go. There you go. And yet, well, would like to make it pretty, so maybe I can get Tim to help me out on this. At the time I did this sketch, I didn't have the logging RDF service yet, so that's something that isn't mentioned in here. But on the other hand, I did throw in these free marker variable sources, variable values, free marker configuration, just as thoughts of things that could be done. This defeat HTTP caching, another thing that has been surprising to developers when they say, well, I changed the free marker template, and even though I have defeated the free marker cache, I still don't see any change, and that's because the browser is smart enough to recognize the caching headers and say, oh, well, I already have that one. So you need to be able to disable that. The question of anonymous control is just saying, do I want to be able to use this without logging in as an admin? And as a developer running this stuff on my desk, yeah, I probably do want to be able to. I can conceive of the idea where you might actually want to use some of this diagnostic stuff in production, and then you would want only admins to be able to manipulate it. I also thought I'd create an optional properties file to hold startup values. So if I want the thing to start with logging enabled but restricted to Sparkle query data getters, I could do that, and that way I would see the queries that were generated during startup. Maybe I always have a set of properties that I use while I'm a developer. Frankly, I almost never turn off now the free marker delimiters because it's just handy to have if I want it. And so I can just set these in a file, and they would be there every time until I disabled them. Kicking around ideas as to what additional features might be useful and interesting, and I guess partly again I'm focused on where did this information come from and why, how did it get onto the page? So because data getters can be configured in a config file and just create free marker variables, I thought it might be useful to be able to show what data getters were used, either in the log or in comments in the HTML, or as I say, in an interactive panel. And that led me to think, well, maybe I want to list what short views were also configured to work with this if you're looking at an index page or a search results page, what custom list views are used if you're looking at a profile page. I'm wondering what I can do with free marker variables, the dump directives that Rebecca created have been useful to some people, but again, I'm kind of wondering, would it be feasible for me to modify the free marker code enough to be able to say, this is a variable we've got here, and this is where you were in the code when that variable was set. To be able to say this one came from the controller, that one came from the data getter, this one came from a macro would be, I think, really handy. So I'm thinking along those lines. I know I'm blathering on here, but I'm just about done. And that is that I've got a wiki page out there where I've put together all this information, including these sketches. And I would love to have people add comments or just go in and edit the page. You need to have a DuraSpace ID in order to add comments to the wiki, but they're free and easy, and we don't send spam. So go ahead, mark it up. Don't worry about it, whether your idea is appropriate or fully fleshed out, because again, I'll use that as inspiration and see where I can go with it. If it is fully fleshed out, that's great. If you want to write some of the code for this, sure, that'd be great too. And that's what I've got. Questions?
Jim, for the some of the proper like the defeat free marker cache and that, was that available in 1.5?
Yeah, I believe in 1.5 it was still called something else.
Okay.
I would have to check the upgrade notes. I think there was a like
We can look at the
something
upgrade
like
notes.
context mode equals developer or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, these are really cool. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're oohing and ahhing over here.
Good.
Now that's awesome, Jim. Thank you very much. I'm excited about the logger service because a lot of times, even if we're putting data into VIVO, there's not always enough feedback in the logs to tell us what we want to know. So I think that's going to be hugely helpful.
Yeah, well, as I say, that actually came up because we were saying, why is the home page taking so long to come up? And we needed to know what actually was happening. And I thought, well, if I just spend a little bit of time on it, it'll be something that'll be useful to other people as well.
No, I think that's going to be great. I was making my own little notes here while you were talking.
Okay. Again, that logger is already described on the wiki page, or in the wiki, and yeah, there we go. But it's just on in the current code. You're not going to find it in 1.5. It's either in 1.6 or you get the develop branch.
Okay.
And what I would really like from people is just to let me know, it would be really helpful if I could have this information, or if I could do this. If it's something that you find yourself, doing a hack for, or going into the debugger for, and it's something that, we could make this more formal and available to other people easily, I'd love to include it.
I also, Jim, this is Chris. I also like the idea of, I guess you'd call it a bootstrap, something where you could turn the options on and off only at runtime when you want to. So if you're with a Vagrant, you wanted to do a restart and turn some of these on, like only look at the Sparkle queries, for example, like in your slide. I think that would be great. Is there some more documentation on how to do that?
No, because you can't do it now. Right now, it's only a startup.
Oh, it's a proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that one would be fantastic. Because I think with the way that we're starting to use Vagrant to develop with, I think it would be neat to be able to start up have a startup file that goes right along with starting up your Vagrant machine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I was writing notes on the RDF's logging service, but so you're proposing creating something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I vote for that one. Where do I go vote for that one?
Well, as I say, probably the best thing to do is to go to the wiki page for this and add a comment.
Okay. Cool. Did everybody get that? If you got a favorite feature you saw in his proposal there, you need to go give him some feedback in his Duraspace wiki article.
Yeah, and of course I would greatly prefer if you had a favorite one that is not in the proposal, but hey, I'll settle for what feedback I can get.
Well, does anybody have any ideas that aren't in the proposal that they thought they would be neat if there was a way to enable some more developer friendly? All right. Well,
Okay,
Jim,
thanks, Chris.
Jim, thank you for coming on and giving us a presentation of that. I'm excited. So, again, that's available in the develop branch and also in the upcoming 1.6 release. So that's going to be exciting. So, I believe Jim has given me. Oh, Jim, I'm going to take presentation control back. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, I was. As you can see, I was looking at the RDF logging service wiki article here, so that was pretty
Yeah.
exciting.
Okay.
And then let's see. Looking for your article on. Oh, there it is. He sent it in the text. So here is a. There you go. Developer motor proposal. So I'm going to add this to the notes if someone hasn't already done it. Oh, there it is. So fantastic. All right, let's switch over here and real quick take a look at our VM. So as you can see, let me scroll back up a little bit here. While we were doing our work, it was over here doing its work. And you can see that it's basically created a config file and it's installing Tomcat 7. Doing things like using debconf to set selections, which Ted's using debconf to set the passwords for the SQL Server account that VIVO is going to need. And then you can see that he's installing MySQL Server, and that installed. And then he was installing MySQL Client. And then he's doing some more provisioning commands. He's using, it looks like, some shell scripting to set up some path information about VIVO. And then he's creating the database. And then he's using his other Git repos to get his templates. Now, these are template files, Ted, that you use that relate to the Brown template, correct? I believe that's correct. I think we might have lost Ted there. And then what it's doing is it's using some submodule. This is a git command. So what he's doing is it lets him clone out the VIVO and Vitro Git repositories as part of his checkout procedure. And as you can see here, it checked out VIVO and it's checking out Vitro. I can tell you it's at this point it's running about 45 minutes, but I think that's because I'm also running this call and doing it at the same time. Because when I did it yesterday, this takes under 20 minutes. But as you can see, even if it takes 45 minutes or an hour, all this work is being done, autonomously. So you're not over here doing this, and the most important thing is it's repeatable. So we'll come back and check on that in a minute. But again, I can't say enough about having a autonomous and configurable setup of a VIVO build. This is kind of, you want to have a development environment and use some of those options that Jim showed you. This is a great way to do it without having to set up traditional servers and do kind of the traditional methodologies of running a full-blown server just to do development. So, let's see what else we got going on. There's a upcoming call on Thursday, and I know that Jim or John, you had been scheduling information about an implementation fest. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you on the call today, real quick, were on the implementation track. Is there going to be any talk about apps and tools?
Well, I think that's kind of the purpose of this meeting I've been arranging is to kind of revisit what the implementation fest is and decide, among other things, we have a third day this year scheduled. And I was talking with Jim yesterday and sort of wondering about whether we should have the implementation fest on Thursday and Friday, but have Wednesday be kind of an event for more hands-on activities. That could be a meeting of the apps and tools people who want to get together and work on apps and tools and then show what they've done on Thursday and Friday, or it could be an ontology session, or it could be some other development. So absolutely, yeah, I think that will be a major focus. So, but this is where the idea is to solicit ideas early on from what people want this event to be and what they'd like to do when they come.
Well,
it's much more of an opportunity to work together than the conference.
Well, I definitely would. I've been looking for some kind of an excuse to have some kind of hackathon-y type event where people can get together in the same geographic location and work on some ideas together. How do people on the call feel about that? What I mean, have you guys from Duke been to an implementation fest yet? I called them out and they're on the phone. So go ahead, Richard. See, Ted was talking, but I can't hear him. We're having some kind of technical difficulty here. Well, John, yeah, I mean, I think that that would be a great idea. I think that now implementation is more than just installing Vivo and loading it with some data. It's making reuse of the data. So, yeah, I would be definitely an advocate of doing that. Having a day where we could get some people together. I'm hoping that we're just having technical difficulties and that Richard and Ted were going to chime in and say yes, they would love to do that too.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, Ted, we can hear you.
Okay, I think the technical difficulties were all on my end. Um, but yeah, I definitely like this idea of a hands-on day, and especially that we're talking about it now, so that when the time rolls around, maybe we have some um, some topics that have been thought about and talked over beforehand, so that we can really sort of hands-on work when we're together at the implementation fest.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Is definitely to create a list of topics for a hackathon. We had a hackathon here at Florida during the grant, and I thought it was. I mean, it was very exciting for me. And at first, there was a lot of thought about are people going to be able to actually do anything in that shorter period of time? Are they going to be able to collaborate with each other? And you would be surprised how fast people form teams and how fast they were able to hack together some of the very early ideas about manipulating data. This is back when there weren't as many tools or ideas or methods that people had used. So I can only imagine now that we've got some more experience that we'd be able to do even more in a shorter period of time. So
Yeah, so I know Melissa Handel is interested in having some sort of an ontology, event where we either review, ontologies that people are proposing adding, or go through and fix stuff that people think is broken or whatever. And I think apps and tools is the other most logical area where people, as you said, have been able to get data ingest done, or but want to use the data in another application, or we could also have an ingest tools, Python-focused ingest tools, or Ruby-focused, or whatever, just to try to, I haven't thought of these as workshops. I've thought of them more as people that are engaged in doing stuff to just get together and work with each other. But the event is really up for grabs. Richard, and Julia and others are hosting it, so they have some considerable say in what they want to do, and what they may want to be interesting to see. Maybe have a chance to really look behind the scenes at what Duke has done with their additional editing and other customizations they've done. But that won't take up the whole time.
This is Patrick at Duke. Richard had to step out, and I haven't been involved in the conversations about it, but I think these sound like really excellent ideas, particularly a list of potential sort of topics or like focuses for a hackathon. That sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm taking notes. I'll pass this on.
Awesome. Yeah, I know Yin just joined the call or joined a while ago. So Yin, what we're talking about is having a possible hackathon at the upcoming Implementation Fest. And we were just trying to give some feedback to John Corson Reichert about whether or not we thought that was a good idea or not. And it's looking so far like we think that's going to be a good idea, and we're going to try and come up with a list of topics.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. And the idea would be to do multiple things or just focus on like one application?
I don't know. We had just literally come up with the idea, coming up with some topics. But at the hackathon we had at Florida during the grant, there was no set agenda, and basically teams formed together the first part of the first morning, and each team had their own idea, and then basically they came together at the end and gave kind of mini presentations on what they had developed, and you'd be shocked. They developed some pretty fantastic stuff. Some of the first visualizations that we had, some of the first data inspector applications.
Nice.
And
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just posted a website that supposedly helps people coordinate hackathons.
Oh, cool.
So hackerleague.org. And so, I mean, I don't know what they do as much as just providing wiki pages and registration and all that kind of stuff. But I know that some of the hackathons that happen here in New York, they use this hackerleague.org thing to kind of coordinate everyone's activities and provide some structure to the hackathons.
Cool. Hacker League. Okay, I'd gotten that wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. That's really cool. Yeah, actually, I realized we've been talking about. I guess we're sort of floating the idea of doing that on the Friday of Implementation Fest, because it goes from Wednesday to Friday. So we were thinking about maybe that last day for sort of a hackathon. I'm not sure how that sounds to folks.
Yeah, I think the question is whether people would stay. You tend to lose people in the last afternoon, but it might be the most motivated people who'd want to do the hackathon. So you could imagine it being sort of an energizing thing to do at the beginning, and then you could show the results, or else you could imagine it being something where you sort of use the first 2 days to motivate what you try to accomplish in the hackathon, or think of it either way.
Yeah, and I guess also starting at the beginning, then people who were really enthusiastic about their ideas, they might have a little bit more time together.
Yeah, some people might end up spending the whole time. Fine, or they might enlist other people to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, where is there's some more information about the upcoming Implementation Fest, about where it's at? I'm sorry, I'm behind.
Well, it's going to be it's in Durham, North Carolina. It's at a hotel, I think, that's right adjacent to the Duke campus. So it has meeting space. Julie has just described it briefly to me. It seems like it's close to their offices. So, and it's close to restaurants and.
And when are the dates that we're looking at?
March 19th to 21st.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of right in downtown Durham here. There's sort of a space we have between, sort of right next to Duke's campus, and
it's an old warehouse that's been renovated.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
But it's very centrally located, and I assume we're getting some kind of hotel.
Yeah, I don't see that information here, but.
Yeah, the hotel is apparently right next door or very close, so sounds like a good setup. And for those of us from the northern part of the country, it'll be warmer than we're used to.
Yeah.
Hey, that's fantastic. And this will definitely be a topic on the next call. I just wanted to show everybody that I wasn't lying. I'm going to flip the screen over now real quick. And you're going to see that the Vagrant box from Ted's example has been provisioned. I'm going to use a command called Vagrant SSH. It auto configures all the keys and all the things you need to get into the box. So I am now in the box, and I'm going to do real quick. I'm going to do a wget on http://localhost Colon 88 Vivo. I know that's not. Oops, sorry. No. I know it doesn't look like it, and that was just a quick example, but you can see this is the homepage.
Uh-huh.
There's currently no content in the system, so it is possible to quickly create an empty Vivo. If you have any questions, definitely email me, and I'm sure Ted would take some email too.
Yeah, I've been trying to start it on my Mac, and I had to install Vagrant, and I had to install VirtualBox, and I can't find base. I mean, there's some few issues that I probably don't understand yet, but
Okay, so you hadn't installed. I guess I could go through a more detailed one. So you had not had VirtualBox installed before.
no.
Okay.
So, and when I tried to, I don't know whether I have to start something in that, to create an Ubuntu VirtualBox instance for this thing to talk to, or whether that's.
No, I think what I might have skipped is when you clone into it, you may have, if it's the very first time you've ever created a Vagrant box, you may have had to do a command called Vagrant init.
Yeah, I did that. It told me I had to do that.
Okay.
But there's probably other stuff I need to read, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had to CD into that or something like that.
You have to be in the directory where you're. Can I give you control, or can I give you presenter?
Sure.
John is so brave. He's willing to show us his stuff.
So here's where I am. So I'm in. So I have a Vivo. I have a Vagrant file, and I have a .vagrant. I have a Vivo Vagrant.
You cloned his
directory.
you cloned his repo called Vivo Vagrant, correct?
Yeah.
And so you needed.
So do I CD into that?
Yep.
Or do I just?
You CD into that. Now you should be able to do a Vagrant up.
Okay, so I was just with.
You are off to the races.
So I just was in the wrong directory. Yeah, you couldn't find the configuration.
Yep. See, so the Vagrant file is specific to each Vagrant instance, and usually it's in a Git repo somewhere at a lower level, and that's where you issue the Vagrant up. But yeah, as you can see on John's machine, it's he's 77%. He's almost got the whole box file downloaded, which is a complete Ubuntu instance. And so, John, it's just going to go through here and set up a Vivo for you. If anybody else had tried this or tried to follow along and they need any help, I'll be glad to stay on after the call and do any kind of help you want.
Well, it looks like this just needs to run for a while.
Yeah, it takes about the very first time. It takes about 15 minutes, and then you can Vagrant up and you can Vagrant halt. That's probably the next command you're going to want, John. So when you're done at the end of the day and you want to kind of shut it down, you go Vagrant halt.
Okay.
Then the next time you want to play with it, you just go Vagrant up again.
So you have to go back into that same directory and do Vagrant up. Okay.
Yep. Well, if you don't halt it, it'll keep running forever.
Oh, okay.
And there's also a command called, if you want to completely start over, it's called Vagrant destroy. It destroys it, and then you can start from scratch. If you had looked, let me do this real quick. I know we're running a little long here. Let me do this real quick. If you can see this on my screen, I brought up the VirtualBox VM Manager. This Vagrant right here, Vivo-Vagrant 13874, it created that on the fly. And so you can see that it's running. So I'm going to flip back over here, and I'm gonna exit out of it, and I'm going to go Vagrant Halt. And then real quick, I'm going to flip back over here, and you'll see it'll stop the VirtualBox session. You see it says attempting graceful shutdown. There it is. It's powered off. So it basically handles all those GUI commands for you through the command line. And so the reason that's kind of important is because it lets you script. It lets you script what you want to do. So one of the next things to work on there, John, is that I'm going to work on, and that's why I'm working on the N3 data as well, is I wanted to have a text-based data file that I could use in a Git repo or have from a web address that I could use to load data into this Vagrant on the fly. So.
Yeah, that would be great for testing purposes.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's all this stuff is in a config file, so you can configure a lot of this, and it's a lot more. It's a lot more convenient than downloading a giant VirtualBox. Not that that's not been awesome and fantastic, and I don't mean to diminish that at all, but this is just kind of, I think this is the next generation of using virtualization to do development. And I think it'll be helpful for the hackathon. I think that the more we develop Vagrant VM that Ted has started, that we'll be able to use that and very quickly get everybody on the same page. I mean, so we can all check out. You were able to check out the same Git repo I was, and you're geographically separated. We were able to pull up the same configured VIVO. So I mean, that's huge. So. Well, hey, thank you everybody for attending this call. I really appreciate it. And again, I believe that I'm going to talk with John about it tomorrow, but I think that we're going to shoot for this as a standard time for these calls. I think this is probably more conducive to the audience that we seem to be attracting. So we'll start looking for bi-weekly calls around 1 p.m. And I'll send out updated agendas and call-in information.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thanks, everybody. And again, if you want to hang out, I'll hang out here for a few minutes if you want me to look at any of your Vagrant attempts.
Yeah, I ran into an issue where I also have Tomcat running, and it was trying to use port 8080, and Tomcat was already using port 80, so port 8080, so it stopped installing.
Oh, okay. So here's what you can do real quick. Are you looking at my screen?
Yeah, so I need to go into the Vagrant file and change the port. I could also shut down my Tomcat, but...
You could, but let me just show you in the Vagrant file real quick here. Let me blow it up.
John, I'll interject while Chris is setting up. You don't have to do what he's doing. Vagrant will automatically reassign redirected ports.
Oh.
And it will tell you what it's doing.
Well, instead it tried to do that. Sometimes Vagrant will attempt to autocorrect this for you. In this case, Vagrant was unable to. This is usually because the guest machine is in a state which doesn't allow modifying port forwarding, so whatever that means.
Okay.
Well,
we'll try to.
You see the Vagrant file I have up on my screen? Do I have it big enough, John?
Yeah.
So in that directory where we did the up, you'll see there's the Vagrant file. And so this is the file, and so right down towards the bottom, there's these directives.
Yeah.
So you could change 8080 to 8081 or 8083.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me.
That's pretty much it.
I made some notes in the Google Doc while you guys were chatting about specific Vagrant commands to avoid the slow build. Vagrant suspend sleeps a VM. Vagrant halt shuts it down. And those are good ways to avoid the big rebuild. The thing you don't want to do is Vagrant destroy. If you're trying to avoid the slow rebuild, Vagrant destroy is the wrong command. It's great if you need a pristine machine, and sometimes you really need a pristine machine when you're developing, but it's not your first choice for shutting down a VM.
Well, for example, let's say you had gone through a successful up, John, and you wanted to make a change to the ports. What you can do is you can do a vagrant
Halt.
a vagrant halt, and then a vagrant up, and it'll reread the config file. And when it reloads, it won't clone Vivo and try and reinstall Vivo. It'll just try and change the ports.
Well,
Okay.
it will try the provisioning scripts unless you use the note in here.
I'm sorry, no provision.
Yeah, vagrant up dash dash no provision. That'll come up fast. That's 45 seconds. If you bring a VM up with no provisioning, it comes up really fast. There are
Okay.
ways to make the provisioning go even faster if you use tools like Chef or Puppet, but there's a lot of learning curve involved in there. And so the kind of bash provisioning or shell provisioning that Ted has used in here is, it's pretty accessible and it's not bad. So gets the job done. Follows the KISS principle.
Yeah, so John, one of the things I didn't show is this file here that's in the provision directory called bootstrap.sh. I'll open it up here real quick, and you'll see this is a simple shell script that I don't know if that's big enough. I'm sorry. Let me open it in a different text editor. This is where you can literally copy the commands. This is where I had started, and basically I was copying the commands out of the installation guide that Jim wrote and putting them into this file called bootstrap.sh. And these are the commands that Vagrant runs right after the machine is provisioned. So you can do things like you'll see it's installing these utilities. It's installing Apache. So anything that you wanted to run on the command line of your Vivo server, you can put in this file and it'll run it for you. So look at he's got another provisioning install script where he installs Vivo. So let me open that one here. So you can have one shell script refer to another shell script. Let me see. Code. Vagrant. Provision. Vivo. So this is where he's got his, you saw the deploy.properties in there, but this is where he's got his, he's creating the database and he's doing the git clone and check out of his own templates. I mean, this is just a great example for anybody to follow if they wanted to create, like I'm planning on using this example to create one with UF specific things.
Yeah, the advantage is that if once you use Chef, John, is that you can deploy on any infrastructure. It could be Red Hat, it could be anything, because Chef takes care of all the configurations within each Ubuntu, within each Linux distribution. So clearly the apt-gets aren't going to work, on a Red Hat machine.
Right.
So that's kind of nice.
Well, again, thank you, Jim, for giving your presentation, and thank you, Yin, for coming along. Maybe you can help us in the future convert some of these shell scripts we got into some Chef files.
Yeah, there's a couple. I was looking at it, and there are one or two things that I think the beauty of it is that since there's something that's working already, you can just change the little components, and then if it runs good. And so some of the Apache stuff that can definitely go into a Chef script and this and that. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities to update a few of the components.
I will warn you, once you go down the Chef path, you have to have Ruby support to get some of the chef dependency
Yeah.
going. And on a Mac, well, that kind of leads you down the path of putting in a lot of development tools. You really want to have Brew going, which means you need to have Xcode. So just beware, it's going to be a lot more than just installing VirtualBox and Vagrant. A lot more
Yes.
dependencies.
Yeah.
It's documented stuff.
Yeah.
I share URLs where people describe how to do it, but it's more stuff. It's maybe 2 hours worth of
Yeah.
installing things.
Yeah.
It's still
Hey,
worth
Chris, this email, this text up here in the document, is this Richard Otten who's doing this Jenna API JRuby stuff?
yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Did he present that earlier?
No, we're trying to get him to put it up on GitHub.
Oh, got it. Okay.
They actually wrote
Great.
that,
I would
I
love
think,
to see that.
3 or 4 years ago, and they've been using it in production for a while.
Okay, awesome. Because I was doing something similar a year ago, and then just kind of moved on to other things. But it'd be awesome to take a look at their stuff.
If it's any help, you may want to take a look at Ted Lawless's stuff. He's using PyGenius to create a instance of the Jenna class. So I'm sure it would be similar to what you'd want to do in Ruby. And that's
Okay,
all up on
great.
GitHub.
Awesome.
I mean, he's done a fantastic job of documenting. I mean, so
Great, thanks.
I'm glad I'm hoping he doesn't mind me being his mouthpiece. Well, all right, everybody. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to stop recording and sign off the call.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
All right, talk to you. John, are we on for tomorrow?
I'm going to be on a flight, actually. I'm going out to Colorado, so
Okay.
if you want to set up another time,
Well,
you want to try to call.
Will you let me know? Why don't you just send me a time that you think is good for you?
Okay.
And I'll see what we
Thanks.
can do. All right, guys. Thanks.